Hi everyone. I may have struck gold. Get your oven mitts.
So a friend on Facebook linked me to a blog called Martymer's Paradigm, and damn, this is a gold mine of physics and astronomy related stupid. It's right up my alley, so I just had to get straight to work on it.
The guy behind the blog is a creationist and a geocentrist named Matty, and he believes that... Wait, Matty. Matthew? No. No!
I have a basic question regarding evolution. If you take a look at pine cones actually used to be a lot bigger several decades ago. How is pine cones getting smaller an adaptation?
Nah. Well, he's certainly stupid enough. Never mind.
Anyway, here's how he presents his paradigm. First, science is, supposedly, based on a number of leaps of faith. 1. The human species is the result of a process of evolution. 2. Radioisotopes have always decayed at the same rate and the Earth is billions of years old. 3. The Earth orbits the Sun. 4. The word sun is used synonymously with star. As such, our sun is one of billions of stars which are traveling through a vast cosmos. 5. Gravity is proportional to mass, and there is a gravitational constant that applies throughout the universe. 6. God, whatever form you choose, is not a causal factor, merely an optional extra. Okay, let's have a look at these. 1. Nope, this is not a faith-based belief, but a conclusion based on evidence. 2. Same here. 3. This one too. 4. Take a guess. 5. Getting bored yet? 6. Okay, finally we get to one that can't be addressed in that way, because this is indeed not a conclusion based on evidence. Rather, it's a consequence of methodological naturalism, the philosophical foundation of science. The goal of science is to describe nature in terms of natural laws. This is because appeals to what lies beyond nature, beyond that which we can interact with and observe, are always impossible to test. Thus, they can't be evaluated in any practically meaningful sense and therefore can't add anything to our understanding of how nature works. What this means is that the existence of a supernatural being is in all practical ways indistinguishable from its non-existence. The only way to get by this is to sacrifice methodological naturalism and thus the ability to distinguish between natural events and magic, meaning that it becomes impossible to investigate anything scientifically, since literally anything could be fully explained by the phrase,
It's magic, bitch.
The point is that this isn't a leap of faith, it's a choice to care about the practical usefulness of science. With methodological naturalism, it's useful. Without it, it wouldn't be. You can't build electronic devices if you're satisfied with lightning is magic. Now, maybe the truth is that phenomenon X really is magic, but that wouldn't be helpful to us in any way, since we can't distinguish its magic from its natural, but we just don't know how it works. That's why we might as well keep looking for a natural explanation. If it isn't natural, we'll never find it, but even then, we may make other useful discoveries in the process, so it's still better than settling with its magic.
Instead of these so-called leaps of faith, Matty's paradigm uses the following basic beliefs. The first thing you might notice is that Matty's doing exactly what he falsely accuses science of doing. Declaring that a desired conclusion is a basic belief, essentially an axiom. And that's not how axioms should work.
An example of an axiom used in science, or at least it could be called an axiom, is the declaration that inductive reasoning properly applied leads to useful general conclusions. This is something that cannot be proven without the use of inductive reasoning, so the proof would be circular. However, the benefits of the scientific method are obvious, provided that we accept the usefulness of inductive reasoning, of course. And since inductive reasoning is a necessary part of this method, it is simply accepted as useful without any solid logical proof.
If you have a problem with that, fine. Disregard the axiom. You're free to do so. I can't compel you to accept it because I can't prove that it's true. Just don't use it. Don't use inductive reasoning. Good luck!
A highly inappropriate use of an axiom would be to have an axiom that says, for example, that all swans are white. This is something that can be investigated. Find 100 swans, all of them being white, and inductive reasoning will tell you that yes, all swans being white seems like a useful, if not necessarily correct, conclusion. Given the axiom we covered before, this new axiom therefore seems unnecessary. But what's worse, find one swan that isn't white and you know for a fact that the axiom is false. But an axiom can't be false, that's the whole point. This is why you never accept something that you can test or even prove or disprove as an axiom. You want to be able to test it.
With this in mind, let's have a look at these basic beliefs.
God doesn't lie. Well, let's begin with his existence being self-evident. The statement God exists is not a tautology unless we first conclude that God is something that exists. We can't define something into existence either. Defining God as a supernatural omnipotent being that exists won't make him exist. All that does is declare that a supernatural omnipotent being that exists, if found, will be referred to as God. That's how definitions work. You can't define God into existence any more than you can define $1 million into your suitcase. So again, the statement God exists is not a tautology. And if it's not a tautology, it's not self-evident. Now, God doesn't lie is a statement about God. Since Maddie believes that God exists, he must necessarily believe that the truth of this claim is something that can be investigated. If God were to tell a lie, the statement would be falsified.
I can't address this beyond that because Maddie doesn't specify exactly what he means by God, but what I can say is that it's definitely inappropriate to call it a basic belief.
Gravity is a created thing around which the Earth formed, and there's a crystalline firmament on the edge of space enclosing the cosmos. This can be investigated, and unlike the last one, this can be and has been falsified, at least the first part. Gravity is not a thing inside the Earth, but the observable phenomenon of massive bodies attracting each other. This can be observed throughout the universe, and it can even be measured between bodies like lead balls in laboratories here on Earth. As for the crystalline firmament, unless Maddie wants this to be demonstrably non-existent, it would have to be outside the observable universe, and that would make it both unfalsifiable and indistinguishable from non-existent, rendering this basic belief completely pointless. Earth is the center of creation, but we do not believe traditional geocentricity.
Okay, I'm actually pretty much cool with that. Aside from the use of the loaded term creation, I'm actually okay with regarding Earth as the center of the universe. Sort of.
The reason for this is that there is no meaningful way to talk about a center of the entire universe, and since we are on Earth, Earth is the center of our observable universe. It makes sense to describe our reality from our perspective, as long as this description is useful, and it usually is. But as for making this a basic belief, that's stupid because it's not really a belief, it's just an arbitrary decision. This belief, if you want to call it that, will only get in the way when it's practical to use another perspective. Earth is about 6,000 years old, but we are not traditional young Earth creationism.
This shouldn't be a basic belief, and frankly, I don't think it is. I think he got it from Usher, who got it by adding up the ages of people in the Bible. So in other words, it's a belief that is derived from something else, and therefore it's not basic. It's also demonstrably false, unless, of course, Maddie wants to accept that the Earth was created with the false appearance of being billions of years old. But, of course, another one of his basic beliefs is that God never lies, so that's not an option. Guess you're screwed.
The Sun orbits the Earth and the Sun form the two foci in Kepler's first law of planetary motion. And the Sun is less massive than the Earth. The other planets are also less massive but have the same mass relationship to each other. Thanks, Newton.
Okay, here we go. First, these are not basic beliefs. Maddie cites various observations and also Bible verses to try to support these, so They're definitely not basic beliefs, but what I want to get into here is that Maddie actually asks for proof that Earth orbits the Sun, and, well, I'm happy to oblige. First, however, we have to acknowledge that proof doesn't exist in science, not in the absolute sense as in mathematics. What matters is how well a model represents the reality it's intended to describe, and that's determined by its usefulness. To be useful, a model needs to not only fit all known relevant facts, but it also has to make testable predictions. Now, if we assume that all planets and the Sun orbit the Earth, we have to deal with one inescapable fact. If we track the planets as they move across the sky, we find that they occasionally appear to move backwards. We also find that Venus and Mercury never appear opposite the Sun in the sky. They always stay close to it. In the 16th century, Copernicus was able to explain all these things by proposing that all planets, including Earth, actually orbit the Sun. Look at it this way. This is how the solar system moves if we stick a pin in the Earth so that we only see how things move relative to Earth. Now let's change nothing but which planet we put the pin in. Here's Mercury. Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and the final planet known at the time, Saturn. And now, finally, the Sun. Notice how all the weird spiral patterns go away? Once it was realized that you get a much simpler and much more elegant model of the solar system if you have the planets orbiting the Sun instead of the Earth, the geocentric model was dead. The only way to have the Earth in the center was if you had the planets orbiting the Sun, which then in turn orbited the Earth. But what reason was there to believe that the Earth was in any way special? Well, there was one. Clearly the Moon orbits the Earth. That makes Earth different from the planets because planets clearly don't have anything orbiting them, right? Right? Well, we can't see any indication of that with the naked eye.
Enter Galileo Galilei, who, among other things, pointed a telescope at Jupiter and saw 4 bodies that came to be named Io, Ganymede, Europa, and Callisto. Jupiter, like Earth, has moons orbiting it. Turns out planets can have things orbiting them. Earth is a planet, and it should therefore orbit the Sun just like the rest of them.
I know, yeah. Should, so prove that it does.
Now enter Johannes Kepler and Sir Isaac Newton. Kepler made several observations that he summarized in his 3 laws that describe how planets move. The problem was he couldn't explain these laws. They were derived purely through empirical observation. There was no theoretical work behind them. That work was done later by Newton, who proposed that it was gravity that made the planets orbit the Sun in accordance with laws that he had already worked out that governed centripetal motion. From his laws, Kepler's laws can be derived perfectly. And not only that, they can be generalized to apply to any body orbiting another due to their mutual gravitational attraction. What's funny is that Maddie acknowledges that we have the correct mass of the Earth and the correct distance between the Earth and the Sun, but he claims that we get the Sun's mass wrong and thus the wrong answer to the question of which body orbits which, that is, where the barycenter is located, because like Newton, we assume that the Earth orbits the Sun in 365 days, as opposed to the Sun orbiting the Earth in 24 hours. Because of course Maddie doesn't even accept that the Earth rotates.
If you want a sun that orbits the Earth, you can't shorten the orbital period. If you want to invert the relationship between the Earth's and the Sun's masses, putting the barycenter close to the Earth's core, the Sun would orbit the Earth not in 24 hours, not in 365 days, but in almost 600 years.
But guess what, Maddie? We haven't even gotten to the best part. See, a scientific theory makes predictions. Can the geocentric model predict the orbit of a newly discovered object in the solar system? Tell me, did geocentrists correctly predict the orbits of Uranus or Neptune, planets unknown when the heliocentric model was introduced? Or any body in the solar system discovered since then? No, but astronomers using the heliocentric model did, and still do today. The best indicator of a theory accurately representing reality is its ability to make successful predictions, and the heliocentric model does that consistently.
Sorry, Maddie, but there you have it. To the extent that science can prove anything, it has proved the heliocentric model of the solar system. That model has empirical success. It makes successful predictions. That's how you prove things in science. We're done. But I know it's not going to satisfy you. I've done this before, and I know that nothing will convince you, because on your blog you say that whenever science and the Bible are in conflict, science must be wrong. And that makes it very dishonest of you to even ask for proof.
Now let's look at that other thing Maddie said, that the Sun and the Earth form the two foci of planetary orbits. This is easy. First of all, he thinks that an elliptical orbit must have a source of gravity in either focus. This is not true, and I simply don't understand where he gets this idea. When a planet is near the Sun, it accelerates more due to the Sun's gravity. It builds up speed and thus kinetic energy. Because energy is conserved, this energy won't go away. Instead, the planet is thrown into a higher orbit, so the kinetic energy becomes potential energy. As it gets higher, it slows down and thus begins to fall back into a lower orbit, ending up right back where it started. No second source of gravity needed. Second, if the orbit of every planet has the same two focal points, that would mean that all the planets share the same orbit. This is demonstrably false and has been accepted as false since long before anyone thought of the heliocentric model. The planets clearly follow different paths across the sky.
Pine cones. Pine cones. Pine cones.
The Sun is not a star. Stars are not suns. Stars are reflective rocks in the Kuiper belt made of ruby and sapphire, giving the appearance of being red or blue shifted.
Okay, clearly Maddie's just making shit up at this point. But then he adds the prediction that we should be able to prove this by measuring the distances to stars and Kuiper belt objects using radar, because they will turn out to be the same distance away. Of course, that's not going to work, because the angular sizes of these objects are just too small to resolve on radar. But
here's another prediction. Spectroscopic analysis of light coming from the stars should show that it's just sunlight, but with absorption lines consistent with a surface made of the materials you suggest. This prediction has already been falsified. Stars emit their own light and do not have the composition Maddie suggests. Furthermore, red and blue shifting does not literally make bodies appear red or blue. It simply decreases or increases the wavelength of electromagnetic waves coming from the object, which means that the absorption lines in the spectrum move in one direction or the other. The color of the surface doesn't displace the absorption bands, so painting an object red, for example, won't fool a spectroscope. In fact, it would only end up indicating that the surface has the chemical composition of the red paint used. Third, even Maddie accepts that stellar parallax can be used to measure the distance to a star, at least in principle. However, he says that since Galilei failed to measure any stellar parallax, it follows that Earth is stationary. Of course, he ignores the other possible conclusion, that the stars are so far away that they might as well be at infinite distance. That was Galilei's conclusion. But like a true science denier, Maddie also ignores all later attempts to measure stellar parallax using instruments not available to Galilei. The first successful measurement is attributed to Friedrich Bessel in 1838, and today it's a routine thing. For example, the parallax of Proxima Centauri has been measured to 0.7687 arcseconds to the accuracy of plus or minus 0.0003 arcseconds. This translates to a distance of 1.3009 parsec or 4.243 light years. About 5,000 times the semi-major axes of the most distant Kuiper belt objects.
Finally, Maddie, we've sent probes to and even through the Kuiper belt. Pioneers 10 and 11 and Voyagers 1 and 2, and of course New Horizons is there right now. You're simply wrong.
Evolution is real. It began after death entered the world after the fall of man, Genesis 3.
Once again, I'm wondering how you can call something a basic belief when you got it from somewhere. But anyway, this belief is clearly false because evolution is shown throughout the fossil record, which stretches back billions of years.
Radioisotopes began to decay explosively at this time, causing the core of the Earth to melt. This is what we know of as hell.
And evidently, physics started working again once humans began recording history, meaning that all of this decay, billions of years worth of decay, must have happened in what, a couple of centuries? That wouldn't just melt the core, that would melt the whole planet. We're here. Ergo, you're wrong.
Pine cones.
Hell is expanding, which is the cause of global warming.
Well, at least he acknowledges that global warming is happening, which means he is demonstrably smarter than Donald Trump. Of course, the real cause of global warming is human use of fossil fuels, or at least it is the most important cause. There may be others, but that's definitely the key one. This is known, it's well understood by scientists, and the only people objecting to it are found outside the scientific community.
Stars will fall to Earth in accordance with biblical prophecy.
Maddie doesn't back this up except by saying that because stars are tiny rocks and the Bible says they'll fall, they will, so I really don't have anything to say about that. Well, except...
Maddie, you say that the Earth being flat, which is clearly implied in several verses and even stated outright in Isaiah 40:22, which says circle as opposed to sphere, even in the original Hebrew, is stupid because the Earth obviously isn't flat. Yet in other places where it's equally obvious that the Bible is wrong, you do the typical creationist thing and say that any apparent evidence that contradicts the Bible must be wrong. The basic belief you should be presenting is the Bible is completely true except where you, Maddie, has arbitrarily decided that it isn't. The realization that the Bible is wrong, at least when taken literally, is what should make you understand that if you want to know something about observable reality, you don't go to the Bible. The Bible is the source of claims. You know that some of those claims are false, or at least require a non-literal interpretation to be considered true. What you should do is investigate the claims by comparing the Bible's description of observable reality to observable reality itself. You have a map and a place. If the place isn't like the map says, it's not the place that's wrong. It's the map.
And as far as maps go, the Bible sucks. See ya.